Good evening, my dear students. Today, for your International Relations Theories and Approaches paper, I will be talking about realism as an approach to international relations. आज मैं आपसे अंतर्राष्ट्रीय राजनीति के यथार्थवादी सिद्धांत के ऊपर बात करूंगा. You know, realism has become a hegemonic discourse of international relations theory. But let us begin from its basic premises. Realist theory is about a pessimistic view of human nature. It suggests that human nature is bad, and since human nature is bad, men are power-seeking, egoistic, and because of this thing, states also behave in certain power-seeking ways, and they have aggressive foreign policy. Conflict, struggle, and wars are a recurrent feature of international politics because of this phenomena. Whenever I teach my students about realism as a theory of international relations, I always give them the idea that, Bellis Smith book, it talks about 3S formula of understanding realism. What are these 3S? These are statism, self-help, and survival. If you remember these three keywords, you will understand the basics of realism as an approach to international relations. First thing first. So come to the first point, statism. Statism means a state is the most important, most central actor in international politics according to realist worldview. Self-help, that's the second point. In international politics, there is an anarchic world environment. Why? Because there is no overarching central authority over and above the sovereign states. This happens because in international politics, unlike domestic politics where the state is sovereign, there is no overarching authority that will have a final say on the matters of governance in international body. So in this self-help scenario, all the states try to maximize their power and security. These two words can be interpreted in different ways. So it leads to arms race. It causes security dilemma, which I will discuss further. So in this self-help scenario, conflict is inevitable because all the states within their capacity try to maximize their power and security. Now, third point is about survival. Since all the states are living in an international state of nature, you must have read Hobbesian state of nature. So likewise, in the realist theory of international relations, you have an international state of nature where it is a jungle law. So in this situation, no states will rely on the other state to protect itself. So it becomes the bounden duty of every sovereign state to protect its own territorial integrity and the security of its citizens. So the survival instinct becomes important. So also for survival, the states try to maximize their power and security. So these three keywords define realism for us. So realism in a way is a power politics model of international politics. It has a great realist tradition. There are various thinkers associated with it. There have been intellectual precursors of realism like Thucydides, who wrote the history of Peloponnesian War. Then you have Sun Tzu, who wrote the Art of War. Sun Tzu was a Chinese thinker. He wrote the Art of War, in which he has given many realist prescriptions for international politics. And Chinese have a very strong realist tradition of foreign and security policy making because they have a deeply ingrained realist strategic culture. There are scholars who also suggest that the Chinese have a keen sense of balance of power politics. There are also other antecedent factors associated with this development, but the idea of a very strong realist tradition stems from these thinkers, this realist tradition of realism, and China has inevitably a very strong realist tradition, which gets reflected in its foreign policy behavior even nowadays. Even in the contemporary corona crisis, you can analyze this aggressive foreign policy postures of the Chinese people, the Chinese state at least. Now, another intellectual precursor of realism were Machiavelli, Hobbes, and then the important E.H. Carr. E.H. Carr. Hobbes and Machiavelli also gave a very pessimistic view of human nature. And this pessimistic view of human nature, according to these classical realists, this bad human nature was responsible for selfish state behavior in the arena of international politics. So what these classical realists do, they suggest that this human nature is bad, which gets reflected automatically in the behavior of the states, and that's why there is minimum cooperation in international politics but maximum conflict emerges. They say conflict is an everlasting, is an eternal feature of international politics. You must have heard about E.H. Carr. E.H. Carr, in his work 20 Years Crisis, he has vehemently lambasted, he has criticized the utopian idealists of the interwar period who failed to account for the real selfish and power-seeking motives that drive behavior of states in international relations. And in those interwar period, they were hopeful that the law, international institutions, and morality will prevail upon the states, and they will refrain from waging war again after seeing the disastrous consequences of the First World War. But this was not to be. What happened actually, that the states again behaved in their power motive way, in this selfish and aggressive way, and the result was the disastrous Second World War. So E.H. Carr, as a realist, he vehemently criticizes the utopian idealists, because idealists say that human nature is peace-loving and all that. They prize morality, international law, and international institutions to bring about cooperation in international politics. After discussing these intellectual precursors, I should come on the next point, that Morgenthau, Hans J. Morgenthau, was the first one to give a very systematic and coherent explanation of realist theory of international politics. Hans J. Morgenthau wrote the book Politics Among Nations, first published in 1948. He has given 6 principles of political realism, which are very important. The first one was that politics is governed by objective laws which have their roots in human nature. Second was, the key to understanding international politics is the concept of national interest defined in terms of power. Thirdly, the idea of national interest is the essence of politics and is consistent, but its content and context keeps on changing as it is very dynamic in character. Next one is, universal moral principles cannot be applied to a state behavior. Another important principle is there is a difference between moral aspirations of a nation and universal moral principles. The sixth and the last point of Hans J. Morgenthau's 6 principles of realism is it maintains the autonomy of the political sphere. Now, discussing further points about realism, realism is often portrayed as an amoral theory, that it is not concerned about ethics and morality, because it has projected the image of humans as lustful and power-seeking creatures. And because of its insistence that ethical considerations should be strictly excluded from foreign policy decision-making. But apart from this, there is also a misconception that realists support endless wars. In reality, realists are practitioners of prudence. They suggest to have a pragmatic worldview. They suggest cost-benefit analysis in a particular foreign policy decision-making. They are not running madly after wars. For example, Hans J. Morgenthau and Henry Kissinger opposed the Vietnam War. There were 41 realist scholars of international theory who signed a petition which got published in the New York Times to oppose the Iraq War of 2003. So, realism as a doctrine is about prudence in a state's behavior. It suggests that states should have cost-benefit analysis in terms of war and peace in foreign policy making. And what matters ultimately is the paramountcy of national interest in international politics and nothing else. Now, I will touch briefly about the difference between classical realism and structural realism. Classical realism had the variable of human nature, bad human nature getting automatically reflected in the bad policies, in the aggressive foreign policy of the states. But unlike that, structural realists or neo-realists, they believe that it is not about human nature, it is about the structure of international politics, particularly the distribution of power, the distribution of material capabilities among various units, that is the states in international politics. Kenneth Walsh has given his theory of structural realism in his book Theory of International Politics, 1979. These structural realists say that anarchy, the anarchical structure of international politics, actually leads to a self-help scenario. Anarchy means absence of a world government. When there is a self-help scenario, all the states will go for armaments, and this arms race can lead to, potentially lead to wars, and this will always lead to a conflictual scenario in international politics. Now this also leads to security dilemma. What is security dilemma? Robert Jervis, in his famous definition in 1976, said when a state increases its security, the other state's security gets decreased. Suppose there are two states in a competition, A and B. If the state A has purchased some missiles or armaments, suppose that its security has increased. The state B feels threatened. It gets a psychological feeling that my security has decreased. So this vicious cycle of security dilemma operates in this way, and this creates a very conflictual aspect of international politics. Also, what is problematic is that states are also interested in relative gains, because the states are not interested in benefits for them per se in any international negotiations. What they are interested is that they should gain more than others. So that's why many international treaties break down. You must have followed climate change negotiations and the failure of various climate change treaties, even when the world is witnessing the scourge of global warming. So the fact that the states are always interested in relative gains, this reduces the effectiveness of international organizations. Now I will touch briefly about the realist prescriptions of balance of power. Balance of power is a very key mechanism of maintaining peace according to realists. But there is a slight difference between the approach of classical as well as structural realists. Classical realists suggest that the balance of power emerges because of the prudent statecraft. But neo-realists suggest that balance of power emerges because of the structural dynamics, that is the distribution of power in international politics. Thank you for today. We will meet in the next lecture. Thank you.